Admiral Thomas Reed straightened his uniform one last time before entering the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The massive dome, with its spiraling architecture that seemed to defy gravity, always made him feel small. But not today. Today, humanity would no longer bow to the whims of species who looked down on them. The chamber buzzed with the sounds of 32 different species. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others sat on specially designed chairs, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline vessels. Reed walked with purpose down the central aisle, his footsteps echoing across the polished stone floor. "The human representative approaches," announced the council speaker, a tall, blue-skinned being whose species had been among the founders of the council 10,000 years ago. All eyes turned to Reed. The humans had only joined the council 50 years ago, making them the newest members by far. Most species had been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. The oldest, the luminary, claimed to have achieved spaceflight when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. "Admiral Reed, you have requested an emergency session," said the speaker. "The council grants you the floor." Reed nodded and stood at the center podium. The holographic displays around him showed the faces of council members too large or too distant to attend in person. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Reed began, his voice steady and clear. "For 50 years, humanity has been a loyal member of this organization. We have contributed our soldiers to your defense fleets. We have shared our unique art and culture. We have even adapted our economies to fit your trading systems." Several council members nodded, though most remained still, their expressions unreadable to human eyes. Yesterday, this council voted to restrict human expansion into new star systems, citing concerns about stability and resource management. This was the 12th restriction placed on humanity in the past decade. The speaker raised a slender hand. "These measures are for the good of all galactic citizens. Admiral, your species expands too quickly, develops technology too recklessly." Reed's jaw tightened, yet when the Void Collective attacked the Proxima sector last year, it was human ships that responded first. It was human soldiers who gave their lives while council deliberations dragged on for weeks. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Void Collective attack had been devastating, and many remembered how human forces had held the line. "The Council appreciates humanity's military contributions," said an elder representative, his voice conveyed through a translation field. "But young species must be guided by the wisdom of those who have seen civilizations rise and fall." Reed looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as he could. "We have tried to follow your guidance. We have slowed our research into certain technologies at your request. We have limited our population growth. We have even adopted your legal systems." He paused, letting the words sink in. But yesterday's vote revealed the truth. No matter what we contribute, no matter how we conform, humanity will always be treated as children at the adults' table. The speaker's blue skin darkened with emotion. "Admiral Reed, this is most inappropriate." "I am not finished," Reed said firmly. "My government has authorized me to deliver this message. As of today, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council." The chamber erupted in shock. Some species communicated through light patterns that flashed frantically across their bodies. Others spoke in rapid, overlapping voices that the translation systems struggled to keep up with. "This is unprecedented," the speaker declared. "No species has ever withdrawn from the Council once admitted." Reed remained calm as the chaos swirled around him. "Our decision is final. Human ships will withdraw from Council space within 7 standard days. Our trade agreements will be honored until their expiration dates, but will not be renewed." An elder floated closer, its ancient eyes narrowing. "Without the Council's protection, humanity will be vulnerable." For the first time, Reed smiled. Perhaps the Council will discover just how much it has come to depend on humanity. He removed the Council insignia from his uniform and placed it on the podium. The small metal disc made a surprisingly loud sound in the now silent chamber. "Farewell," Reed said simply, then turned and walked back down the aisle. Behind him, the council remained frozen in disbelief. None of them had imagined that humans, the youngest species in the council, would dare to leave. None of them had considered what would happen if they did. As Reed exited the grand doors of the chamber, his communication officer waited with wide eyes. "Is it done, sir?" she asked. Reed nodded. "It's done. Signal the fleet. We're going home." As the human delegation departed the Galactic Council headquarters, no one yet realized that this was the day everything would begin to fall apart. "The humans will come crawling back within a month," Elder Krell declared, his crystalline appendages shimmering with confidence as the emergency council session continued. "They are emotional creatures who act on impulse. When they realize the protection they've lost, they will beg to return." Most council members nodded in agreement. The departure of humanity, barely a footnote in galactic history, seemed more like an annoyance than a crisis. High Counselor Vez, one of the few who had studied human history closely, looked less certain. "I would not be so quick to dismiss them," she warned, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Humans adapt faster than any species we've encountered." "They are children," scoffed Ambassador Dole of the Mercantile Alliance. "Their entire civilization spans less than 10,000 years. My own species was charting star maps when humans were still living in caves." The council voted to establish a monitoring committee and moved on to other matters. The humans would either return or become irrelevant. Either way, the great wheel of galactic civilization would continue turning as it had for millennia. Or so they thought. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Dole stared at the empty docking bays in the massive trading hub of Nexus Station, where normally hundreds of human cargo ships would be unloading goods from Earth colonies. There was only empty space. "Where are the human grain shipments?" he demanded of the station manager. The manager, a tall insectoid being, clicked her mandibles nervously. "The humans canceled all pending deliveries when they left the council. Did no one inform you?" Dole's skin flushed a deep orange with anger. "Find replacement suppliers immediately." "We've tried, Ambassador. The humans were supplying 40% of the grain for this entire sector. No other species has the surplus to fill that gap on short notice." This scene repeated across council space as the absence of human goods became apparent. Human colonies had specialized in agriculture, manufacturing components, and raw materials that many worlds had come to rely on without realizing it. In the military command center of the Council Defense Force, General Orcs reviewed the latest security reports with growing concern. "Pirates have hit 3 more transport convoys in the Outer Rim," his lieutenant reported. "Without the human patrol ships, we're stretched too thin." Orcs growled, revealing sharp teeth. "Reassign the 7th Fleet to cover those sectors." "Sir, the 7th Fleet was 40% human vessels. They've all returned to Earth space." The general stared at the holographic map showing the vast territories the Council was responsible for protecting. Red warning indicators were appearing faster than they could respond. "The Council assured me that human military contributions were easily replaceable," Orcs said quietly. His lieutenant remained silent, the answer obvious to both of them. The Council had been wrong. On the pleasure world of Elysium, famous for its entertainment districts, the owner of the largest venue watched as crowds dwindled night after night. "Why are we losing customers?" he asked his manager. "The human music and films have stopped coming," she explained. "Their entertainment was our biggest draw. People from 15 systems would travel here to experience it." The owner frowned. "Surely other species produce entertainment." "Of course, but nothing that generates the same emotional response across so many different species. Something about human creativity seems to resonate universally." Across council space, similar cultural voids began appearing. Human cuisine disappeared from restaurant menus. Human fashion trends that had been widely imitated vanished. The absence of humanity was becoming impossible to ignore. In the private chambers of the council speaker, an emergency meeting convened 1 month after humanity's departure. The situation is becoming untenable, admitted Elder Krell, his earlier confidence gone. Food shortages have been reported on 7 worlds. Trade route attacks are up 300%, and public unrest is growing as human cultural exports have ceased. The speaker looked around at the gathered representatives. We may have miscalculated the humans' importance to our infrastructure. High Counselor Vez nodded grimly. I warned you. Humans integrated themselves into our systems more thoroughly than any species before them, and in record time. Then what do you suggest? Asked the speaker. We must send a diplomatic mission to Earth, Vez replied. Not to demand their return, but to negotiate it. As equals. A heavy silence fell over the room. The idea of treating humans as equals, a species so young they had barely mastered spaceflight by Council standards, was unprecedented. But as reports continued to flood in of systems destabilizing across Council space, they realized they had no choice. Prepare a delegation, the speaker finally ordered. We will offer concessions. None of them could have imagined that in just 1 month, the departure of the Council's youngest member would shake the foundations of a galactic civilization that had stood for eons. And this was only the beginning. Elder Ambassador Lore had lived for over 700 years. In that time, he had negotiated peace treaties during 3 interstellar wars, prevented the collapse of the galactic economy twice, and even convinced the reclusive mist beings to join the Council. He was considered the greatest diplomat the galaxy had ever known. Yet as his ship approached Earth, he felt something unusual. Nervousness. We are being scanned by multiple defense platforms, reported the pilot. Human military vessels are moving to intercept. Lore nodded calmly, though his inner membranes fluttered with concern. The scanners on his ship had already detected far more human warships than their official Council registry had ever indicated. Open a channel, he ordered. The view screen activated, showing a stern-faced human officer. Council vessel, state your purpose. I am Elder Ambassador Lore, leading a diplomatic delegation from the Galactic Council. We request permission to land and meet with your leaders. The officer's expression didn't change. Transmit your delegation list and await authorization. The screen went dark. Not the warmest welcome, muttered one of Lore's aides. They have no reason to be warm, Lore replied. We've spent decades treating them as inferiors. Authorization came an hour later, and our ship was escorted to a landing pad at the United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva. As they descended the ramp, Lore was surprised to see Admiral Reed waiting for them. Ambassador Lore, Reed greeted with a stiff nod. Welcome to Earth. Admiral Reed, I appreciate your government agreeing to meet with us. Reed led them through the building to a large conference room, where several human officials waited. Maps displayed on wall screens showed something that made Lore pause. Human ships were no longer patrolling Council space. Instead, they had formed a defensive perimeter around Earth's territories and allies. You've redeployed your entire fleet, Lore observed. Reed nodded. Our priority is protecting our own citizens now. The head of the human delegation, President Garcia, got straight to the point. Ambassador, we understand the Council has concerns following our withdrawal. We're willing to listen, but understand that our decision is final. Lore chose his words carefully. Certain difficulties have arisen since your departure. We believe mutually beneficial arrangements could be made to address these issues. You mean the food shortages on Proxima worlds, or the pirate attacks in the Cygnus corridor? Asked Garcia. Lore's inner membranes fluttered again. The humans shouldn't have known about those problems already. Unless you've been in contact with other species, he realized. Reed smiled slightly. Just because we left the Council doesn't mean we stopped communicating with the galaxy. In fact, we've formed new alliances with several non-Council worlds. The Drothi? Lore asked, naming a species the Council had repeatedly denied membership. Among others, Reed confirmed. Turns out, there are many advanced civilizations the Council has marginalized over the centuries. Together, we're establishing a different kind of interstellar community. Lore decided to change tactics. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions, removal of expansion restrictions, 2 additional seats on the High Committee, priority trading status. For a moment, the humans looked at each other. Then, unexpectedly, they laughed. "Ambassador," said President Garcia, "you still don't understand. We're not looking for a better position within your existing system. We've moved beyond it." She gestured, and the wall display changed to show images of massive shipyards in orbit around Mars. Ships of designs Lore had never seen were under construction. "Since leaving the Council, we've implemented technologies your people suppressed for centuries," Reed explained. "Quantum gravity manipulation, consciousness-guided navigation, energy generation methods your scientists claimed were impossible." Lore stared at the images, shocked. The Council strictly regulated technological development to prevent destabilizing advancements. "But without those regulations, how did you progress so quickly?" he asked. "We've always developed faster than other species," Garcia said simply. "The Council's restrictions were holding us back. Now we're free to innovate at our natural pace." Lore suddenly understood the true magnitude of the Council's miscalculation. They had believed humans needed the Council to survive in a dangerous galaxy. The reality was the opposite. "What do you want from us, then?" Lore asked quietly. Reed leaned forward. "Nothing. We didn't ask for this meeting. You came to us." "But the Council needs to recognize that the galaxy is changing," Garcia interrupted. "You can adapt to that change, or you can be left behind by it. Either way, humanity is charting its own course now." As Lore and his delegation prepared to leave Earth empty-handed, he realized with growing dread that the Council's problems were far worse than anyone had imagined. The humans hadn't just left the Council. They had outgrown it. The Void Collective watched and waited. They always did. For thousands of years, they had existed at the edges of known space, a shadow civilization that the Galactic Council had fought to contain. The strange, hive-minded beings were not interested in diplomacy or trade. They wanted only to expand, to consume, to add new biological and technological distinctiveness to their collective consciousness. And now, they sensed weakness. "The humans have departed the Council," observed the primary node, its thoughts echoing across the hive mind that connected all void beings. "Their defensive networks have collapsed. The time for advance is optimal," agreed the secondary node. "Council species are in disarray." Throughout the dark fleet of organic mechanical hybrid ships, preparations began. The Void Collective had been waiting for this opportunity for centuries. On the peaceful agricultural world of New Haven, a Council colony, the warning systems activated too late. "Void ships entering orbit," shouted the defense coordinator. "At least 30 vessels." Governor Mila looked up in horror as the sky darkened with the approach of the biomechanical ships. New Haven had only a small planetary defense force. They had always relied on rapid response from human patrol ships stationed in the nearby Antares system. But the humans were gone. "Send distress signals to the Council fleet," she ordered. "Request immediate assistance." The communications officer worked frantically. "All channels are being jammed. I can't get a message out." Outside the command center windows, the first attack pods began to rain down on the colony's main settlement. Mila closed her eyes briefly. Her world had just become the first casualty of humanity's absence. In the Council Defense Force headquarters, alarms blared as reports flooded in from across the outer territories. "Void Collective forces have hit 7 worlds simultaneously," reported General Orz's lieutenant. "New Haven has fallen. Outpost K-12 is under heavy assault. The mining colony on Talax Prime reports multiple breach points." General Orz stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "Where is the 4th Fleet? They should have responded to New Haven immediately." "Still assembled at Rigel, sir. Without the human rapid response protocols, deployment is taking 4 times longer than standard." Ord slammed his fist on the console. "The humans wrote our tactical response algorithms. No one else fully understands how they work. Around him, officers from a dozen species scrambled to coordinate a defense, but chaos reigned. For decades, humans had managed the Council's military logistics, designed their battle plans, and led their most effective strike teams. Now those experienced human officers were gone, and the complex systems they had built were faltering without them. "Sir," called an analyst, "we're detecting void signatures approaching Centauri Gate. If they take the gate, they'll have direct access to the inner Council worlds." Ors felt cold fear grip him. The Centauri Gate was a critical choke point that allowed faster-than-light travel between the outer territories and the core worlds. For years, humans had maintained what they called castle defense around it, a term from their ancient military history that none of the Council species had bothered to study. "Order all available ships to Centauri Gate," Ors commanded. Priority 1. But even as he gave the order, he knew it would be too late. In the Grand Council chamber, emergency sessions had been running non-stop for 3 days. Representatives argued bitterly as reports of void attacks continued to pour in. "The Mercantile Alliance holds the humans responsible for this disaster," shouted Ambassador Dole. "They abandoned their posts knowing the void would attack." "Ridiculous," countered High Counselor Vez. "We drove them away with our arrogance. We are reaping what we sowed." The Council speaker struggled to maintain order as accusations flew across the chamber. Alliances that had stood for centuries were fracturing under the pressure. "The Void Collective has taken Centauri Gate," announced a military liaison, entering the chamber with a grim expression. "The inner worlds are now vulnerable." A stunned silence fell over the assembly. "We need the humans," Elder Krell said finally, his crystalline form dimmed with despair. "Without their military expertise, we cannot hold back the void." The Council speaker looked out at the frightened faces of the representatives. Species that had considered themselves the height of civilization, the pinnacle of evolution, now faced extinction because they had underestimated the importance of their youngest member. "Send a message to Earth," the speaker commanded. Not a request for aid, a distress call. As the message was prepared, a final report arrived. The Void Collective had overwhelmed Arcturus Prime, one of the oldest and most important Council worlds. Everything was indeed falling apart. The distress call from the Galactic Council played on the main screen of Earth's global parliament. Representatives from all human colonies watched in silence as the Council speaker's message ended with the unthinkable words, "We beg for humanity's assistance." Admiral Reed stood before the assembled parliament, his face grim. "The Void Collective has captured 7 Council worlds and the Centauri Gate. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the Council homeworlds within 2 weeks." President Garcia looked around the chamber. "The floor is open for debate. Should humanity respond to this call for help?" A representative from Mars stood first. "Why should we risk human lives for the same council that treated us like children? Let them face the consequences of their actions." Applause echoed through the chamber, but it quickly died down when another representative, an older man from the Alpha Centauri colony, rose to speak. "My grandfather was among the first humans to meet the council races," he said quietly. "He believed that humanity's destiny was to be a force for good in the galaxy. Yes, the council disrespected us, but if we let billions die when we could help, what does that make us?" The debate raged for hours. Some argued for complete non-intervention. Others suggested helping only those council species that had treated humans fairly. Still others called for full military support, arguing that the Void Collective would eventually threaten Earth regardless. Finally, Admiral Reed asked to speak again. "The Council restricted our growth because they feared us," he said. "Not our weapons or our ships, but our adaptability, our creativity, our unpredictability. Perhaps it's time we showed them what humanity is truly capable of when we're not held back." He turned to President Garcia. "I propose a selective intervention using the Prometheus fleet." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Prometheus project had been one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets, developed in the years before they left the Council. "The fleet is ready," Garcia asked. Reed nodded. "All 20 ships are operational, with full crews volunteering for immediate deployment." After a final vote, the decision was made. Humanity would intervene, but on their own terms. Captain Marcus James stood on the bridge of the HFY Prometheus, the first ship of humanity's new fleet. Unlike the utilitarian design of council vessels, the Prometheus ships were sleek and elegant, with technology far beyond anything humans had publicly deployed before. "All ships report ready, Captain," his first officer announced. James nodded. "Begin the jump sequence." The Prometheus fleet used a new form of faster-than-light travel that didn't rely on the traditional gate network. The Council had always insisted such technology was impossible, one of many advancements they had tried to suppress. Jump in 3, 2, 1. Reality bent around the fleet, and in an instant, they vanished from Earth orbit. On the besieged world of Talax Prime, the remaining defenders had retreated to the central city. Void Collective forces surrounded them, their strange biomechanical soldiers advancing steadily through the outer districts. Governor Reen had fought alongside humans during the last Void incursion 15 years ago. Now, as he prepared his people for their final stand, he couldn't help but think about how different this battle would be if human soldiers were still with them. "Governor," called his sensor officer, multiple energy signatures appearing in orbit. "They don't match any known council ship design." Reen rushed to the window just in time to see brilliant streaks of light cutting through the atmosphere. Where they struck, void forces disintegrated instantly. "Get me communication with those ships," he ordered. A moment later, a human face appeared on the main screen. "Governor Reen, Captain Marcus James of the Human Expeditionary Force. Looks like you could use some help." Reen's species didn't have tear ducts, but if they did, he might have wept with relief. "Captain James, how did you get past the Void blockade?" James smiled. "Let's just say humans have been working on some new tricks." Within hours, the human ships had cleared Talax Prime of all Void forces. Their weapons, their tactics, their very method of arrival, all were unlike anything the Council races had seen before. Similar scenes played out across the frontier as the Prometheus fleet divided to tackle Void strongholds. But there was something strange about their pattern of intervention. The Council soon realized humans were only helping worlds that had treated them with respect. Planets whose representatives had voted against human interests repeatedly found themselves waiting for rescue that never came. As Council leaders watched humanity's selective assistance unfold, they were forced to publicly acknowledge a humbling truth. They had gravely misjudged both humanity's capabilities and their importance to galactic stability, and the humans were just getting started. The war room aboard the Council's Central Command Station buzzed with activity as representatives from over a dozen species studied tactical displays showing the ongoing battles against the Void Collective. At the center of the room stood Admiral Reed and Captain James, surrounded by Council military leaders who listened with uncommon humility. "The Void adapts quickly," James explained, pointing to footage of recent encounters. "Every time they face our weapons, they evolve countermeasures within hours. We need to keep changing our approach." General Orcs, who had once dismissed human battle tactics as primitive, now nodded eagerly. "How do we counter their adaptation?" "We don't fight the same way twice," Reed replied. "Predictability is death when facing the collective." The Council commanders exchanged troubled glances. Their military doctrine was built on precision, consistency, and carefully tested protocols. The exact opposite of what humans were suggesting. "You want us to improvise?" asked a luminary commander, the concept clearly foreign to her. James smiled. "Exactly. The Void expects patterns. Give them chaos instead." Within days, Council forces began implementing human combat methods with varying degrees of success. Species that could think more flexibly quickly adapted, while others struggled with the concept of battlefield improvisation. But gradually, the tide began to turn. On the liberated world of Talax Prime, Governor Reen hosted a celebration honoring the human soldiers who had saved his people. To his surprise, many of his citizens had begun adopting human customs, clothing styles, and even phrases. "Your people seem quite taken with humans," he commented to Captain James, who attended as guest of honor. "Cultural exchange goes both ways," James replied, raising a glass of Talaxian spirits. "Your poetry is becoming popular on Earth. 3 of your authors have book deals with human publishers." Reen was stunned. The council always limited cultural exchange, claiming it would contaminate developing species. "Maybe they were afraid of what would happen if we all started sharing ideas freely," James suggested. Across the reclaimed territories, similar scenes played out. As humans fought alongside council species, barriers began to fall. Music, art, food, philosophy, all flowed between civilizations that had previously kept each other at arm's length under council regulations. In the ancient temple library on Luminary Prime, the eldest gathered. These beings, over 1,000 years old, were the true power behind the council, though few knew of their existence. They had guided galactic civilization since before humans discovered fire. "The prophecy is unfolding," said the first elder, her luminescent form pulsing with concern. "The catalyst species has emerged, just as foretold." "We tried to prevent it," replied the second elder. "We restricted them, guided them, slowed their progress." The third elder, oldest of them all, spoke rarely but was always heated. "For 10,000 years, we have feared the coming of the catalyst species, the civilization that would either doom the galaxy to chaos or elevate it to transcendence." On the central platform, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. "We assumed the prophecy meant destruction," continued the third elder. "So we treated humans as a threat to be contained rather than a gift to be nurtured." The gathered elders watched as the hologram shifted to show human ships defending council worlds, human doctors treating alien wounded, human artists collaborating with beings from across the galaxy. "We must tell them the truth," decided the first elder. "We owe them that much." Admiral Reed and President Garcia sat in stunned silence as the luminary first elder concluded her explanation. "You're saying you deliberately held back humanity's development because of some ancient prophecy?" Garcia finally asked, her voice controlled but tense. "We believed we were protecting the galaxy," the elder replied. "The prophecy speaks of a young species with unmatched adaptability that would become the catalyst for transformation. For eons, we interpreted this as a warning." Reed leaned forward. "And now?" "Now we understand it was not a warning, but a promise," the elder said. "The Void Collective is not a random evolutionary path. They are what happens when a species evolves without creativity, without individuality, when biological and technological growth occurs without art, music, or free expression." "What are you saying?" Garcia asked. "We are saying, President Garcia, that the galaxy needs humanity's uniqueness. Your species creates and innovates in ways ours cannot. You blend logic and emotion, discipline and spontaneity. You see possibilities where we see only risks." The elder's form brightened. "The question now is, will humanity share its gifts, or keep them to itself as punishment for our mistakes?" Reed and Garcia exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. The humans now had a choice. They could hold a grudge against the Council for its past treatment, or they could forge a new future based on mutual respect and cooperation. And that choice would determine the fate of the galaxy. 3 months after the Void Collective's first attack, their forces retreated to the far edges of known space. The combined might of humanity's Prometheus fleet and the adapted Council forces had pushed them back farther than in any previous conflict. Victory celebrations erupted across thousands of worlds. But in the Grand Council chamber, the atmosphere was solemn as representatives gathered for what many believed would be the most important meeting in galactic history. Admiral Reed stood at the central podium, the same spot where he had announced humanity's withdrawal. Beside him stood Elder Lore, who had led the unsuccessful diplomatic mission to Earth. Both had changed during the war. Reed's hair had more gray, and Lore's luminescence had dimmed with age and stress. "The Void Collective has been defeated," Reed began, "but not destroyed. They will return, perhaps in decades, perhaps in centuries. When they do, the galaxy must be ready." Elder Lore stepped forward. "For too long, the Council has governed based on age and tradition, rather than merit and ability. We regulated innovation out of fear rather than nurturing it with wisdom." Murmurs spread through the chamber as council members realized what was coming. "Therefore," continued Lore, "the elder races proposed the dissolution of the current Galactic Council and the formation of a new galactic alliance." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Some representatives shouted protests, while others simply sat in stunned silence. When order returned, Reed outlined the proposed structure. "The new alliance will accept members based on what they contribute, not how old their civilizations are. Technology will be shared, not suppressed. Cultural exchange will be encouraged, not restricted." "And what of the elder races?" called out a representative. "Will you still guide us?" Lore's form pulsed gently. "We will serve, not rule. Our experience has value, but so does the fresh perspective of younger species. The Void Collective nearly destroyed us because we became too set in our ways. We cannot make that mistake again." For the next 3 days, debates raged as centuries of tradition were questioned. Some species threatened to leave rather than accept a new order. Others embraced the change enthusiastically. Through it all, human diplomats worked tirelessly alongside those council members who had supported them in the past. Finally, a vote was called. The result, by a narrow margin, the council would dissolve and reform as the Galactic Alliance. 6 months later, on the newly constructed Alliance Station, built using a combination of ancient council wisdom and innovative human design, the first gathering of the Alliance took place. President Garcia and Elder Lore stood together to activate the ceremonial beacon that would signal the beginning of a new era. Around them stood representatives from over 50 species, the original council members plus many that had previously been denied membership. "Today marks not just the formation of a new political body," Garcia said, "but a new understanding between our civilizations. We are stronger together than apart, but only if we respect each other's unique qualities." Lore raised his crystalline appendage alongside Garcia's human hand. "For eons, we feared the prophecy of the catalyst species. We now embrace it. The galaxy will never be the same, and that is cause for celebration, not fear." Together, they activated the beacon, sending pulses of light across the galaxy to announce the Alliance's formation. 1 year after humanity left the Galactic Council, Admiral Reed visited a classroom on Luminary Prime. Once, humans would never have been allowed to teach on this sacred world. Now he watched as human instructors worked alongside luminary elders, teaching young aliens about Earth history. "They're studying the American Revolution," noted Elder Vez, who had accompanied him. "It seems to particularly fascinate our young ones." Reed smiled. The idea that a young, seemingly outmatched group could successfully break away from a powerful empire has certain parallels to recent events. Indeed, Vez agreed. Even more interesting is what followed: the formation of something new and lasting. On the wall screen, the teacher showed a diagram of early American government structure alongside the new Alliance organization. "Our species feared yours might destroy galactic civilization," Vez admitted. "Instead, you may have saved it." Reed watched the eager young faces of a dozen different species as they absorbed the lesson. The turning point wasn't when we left the council, he realized. It was when we chose to come back on our own terms. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had stagnated for millennia were experiencing new growth. Innovation flourished as restrictions fell away. Trade and cultural exchange reached unprecedented levels. And at the heart of it all was humanity, not ruling or controlling, but inspiring, connecting, and catalyzing. The day humanity left the Galactic Council, everything had indeed fallen apart. But from those pieces, something far greater was being built. and the stars themselves seemed brighter for it.